For 30 years, Johnny Carson sat behind that desk on The Tonight Show looking like the most easygoing man in America. That raised eyebrow, that easy Midwestern grin, that ability to make a flop joke land almost as well as a good one. Audiences trusted him. Guests loved him. But behind the scenes, Carson kept something that insiders spent decades denying even existed, a running, unwritten list of people who were simply never invited back. For years, staffers swore up and down that no such list was real. Then, in a recent biography called Love, Johnny Carson, author Mark Malkoff proved otherwise, citing Carson's own longtime producer, Peter Larsally, who confirmed there were more than 30 names on it. Some bands came from a single bad night. Others built quietly over years. Here are 8 of the most famous. 1. Joan Rivers, the betrayal that never healed. No Carson feud is more infamous than the one with Joan Rivers, and the tragedy of it is that nobody was closer to Johnny than Joan. He discovered her in 1965, made her a regular, and eventually named her his first permanent guest host, an enormous vote of confidence in an industry where female comedians were rarely handed that kind of power. For 20 years, the relationship looked unbreakable. Then, in early 1986, Fox came calling. The fledgling network, desperate for a marquee name to launch with, offered Rivers her own late-night show, opposite Carson, for a reported $10 million. Rivers had reason to feel insecure about her future at NBC. A leaked list of potential Carson successors didn't include her name, and her contract negotiations had stalled. She said yes to Fox. What she didn't do was tell Carson herself. According to Rivers, she tried. She has said she called him directly to explain and that he hung up on her twice. Carson, for his part, always maintained the call never happened and that he first learned of her new show through a press release. Either way, the outcome was the same. He felt blindsided by someone he considered family, and NBC's president reportedly had to be the one to break the news to him. Rivers later said plainly, he took it as a complete betrayal. From that point on, Carson never spoke to her again. Not backstage, not at industry events, not even when she approached him in restaurants to say hello. The freeze lasted the rest of his life. Rivers didn't return to The Tonight Show until 2014, 9 years after Carson's death, when Jimmy Fallon finally brought her back. 2. Wayne Newton, the feud that ended up in federal court. Wayne Newton's story with Carson is stranger and darker than most band guest tales because it didn't stay confined to a talk show set. It ended up in a federal courtroom. In 1980, Newton was trying to buy a controlling stake in the Aladdin Hotel in Las Vegas. Carson had also bid on the property and lost. Shortly after, NBC News aired a report implying Newton's ownership was effectively a front for organized crime. Newton was convinced the story traced back to Carson, who had been interviewed by the reporters during their investigation, and he said as much for years afterward, telling Larry King he believed the entire rumor emanated from Johnny Carson's influence. By some accounts, Newton grew so frustrated trying to get a straight answer that he eventually forced his way into a meeting Carson was having with producer Fred DeCordova to confront him directly. Whatever was said in that room, the relationship never recovered. Newton sued NBC for libel and, after a grueling legal battle, won a $5.2 million verdict, at the time the largest libel award against a news organization in Hollywood history, though it was later overturned on appeal. Carson, for his part, simply stopped booking him. A performer who had appeared on the show roughly 30 times vanished from the couch for good. 3. Barbra Streisand, the last-minute cancellation. Streisand and Carson were never warm, but the freeze became permanent in 1975 when she canceled a scheduled Tonight Show appearance at the last minute. For a host who built his entire show around a nightly lineup locked in days in advance, a late cancellation from a superstar wasn't a minor inconvenience. It meant scrambling to fill a valuable segment with almost no notice in front of millions of viewers. Carson, notoriously exacting about professionalism, took it personally. He never held a public grudge match the way he did with Rivers, but Streisand quietly disappeared from his booking sheets for good. It's a smaller story than some of the others, but it says something revealing about Carson. It wasn't always the loudest scandals that got you banned. Sometimes it was simply being unreliable. 4. Billy Preston, banned for being too much fun. Not every ban came from anger. In August 1973, keyboardist Billy Preston, sometimes called a fifth Beatle, tore through a performance of Will It Go Round in Circles that got the studio audience on its feet, an almost unheard-of reaction on a show built around calm, conversational late-night television. Preston got a standing ovation. Carson was reportedly unimpressed for a very specific reason. He believed his viewers were unwinding before bed, not looking to get whipped into a frenzy right before they turned off the TV. Preston was never booked again while Carson hosted, though he did appear during stretches when guest hosts sat in. The episode also made Carson visibly wary of booking high-energy rock acts in general for years afterward. Proof that on The Tonight Show, even success could get you blacklisted if it clashed with the show's mood. 5. Uri Geller and the Amazing Kreskin, banned for claiming real magic. Carson was a skilled amateur magician long before he ever sat behind a desk, and that hobby came with a strict personal code. Sleight of hand was entertainment, but claiming actual supernatural powers was a con. When self-described psychic Uri Geller appeared on the show claiming to bend spoons and read minds through genuine paranormal ability, Carson, who had quietly consulted magicians beforehand about how the tricks were likely done, made sure Geller couldn't use his own props, and the performance famously fizzled on live television. Mentalist the Amazing Kreskin ran into the same wall for making similar claims of real psychic ability rather than admitting to a well-practiced act. Both were frozen out. It's one of the more good-natured entries on this list, but it reveals something true about Carson. He had no patience for guests who tried to deceive his audience, even in the name of showbiz. 6. Jerry Lewis, banned for how he treated the crew. Jerry Lewis was a titan of American comedy, but a week spent guest hosting The Tonight Show reportedly ended his welcome there for good, not because of anything that happened on camera, but because of how he treated the staff off it. According to Malkoff's book, the show's longtime cue card operator, Don Schiff, told Carson that he refused to work Lewis's segments again after Lewis became verbally abusive when a request couldn't be fulfilled fast enough. Carson's response, by all accounts, was immediate and non-negotiable. Despite Lewis's stature, Carson decided he would never guest host or appear on the show again, and with only one brief, reported exception, he never did. It's one of the clearest examples of a rule Carson enforced without exception: mistreat the crew, and no amount of star power saves you. 7. Steve Allen, the original host, banned by his own successor. Perhaps the most surprising name on Carson's list is Steve Allen, the man who created the Tonight Show format in the first place. Allen returned periodically over the years as a guest or occasional guest host during Carson's run. But according to the same reporting, he eventually wore out his welcome after being rude to a crew member, the same offense that doomed Jerry Lewis. It's a small, almost footnote-sized story next to the Rivers feud, but it underlines just how consistent Carson's private rulebook really was. It didn't matter if you were a rising star, a legend, or the very person who invented the show. Disrespect the people running it, and you were done. 8. Dana Carvey, banned over an impression that hit too close. Dana Carvey had been doing an affectionate, exaggerated Carson impression on Saturday Night Live since the late 1980s, and for a while Carson tolerated it. Even if producer Jeff Sotzing later said Johnny wasn't thrilled with the exaggerated mannerisms, feeling they made him look old and confused. The tolerance ran out in 1990, when a sketch depicted Carson as out of touch and clueless in a conversation with his real-life late-night rival, Arsenio Hall. According to the book, Carson referenced the sketch obliquely in his monologue days later, and then simply stopped booking Carvey. It's a reminder that Carson could take a joke, even at his own expense, for years. What he couldn't tolerate was a joke that suggested the persona he'd spent 3 decades building was starting to crack. Taken together, these 8 stories paint a more complicated picture of Johnny Carson than the smiling host America thought it knew. He could be warm, generous, and famously loyal to the people who earned his trust, but he was just as capable of shutting a door forever, quietly and without ever raising his voice. Some bands came from heartbreak, like Joan Rivers. Some came from legal battles that dragged on for a decade, like Wayne Newton's. Others came down to something as simple as how you treated a man holding cue cards. For 30 years, Johnny Carson controlled the most powerful